You are now listening to the War Report Podcast Network.
The ceiling for Auburn football this season is very high, but the floor is also very low. And Georgia's coming to Jordan-Hare Stadium at night. There's a lot to talk about on this jam-packed edition of the Uptempo Podcast. Let's go, baby. Let's go, Auburn family. Let's go, Up-Tempo gang. The vibes are high. I'm your host, Dustin Smith. We got a lot to talk about today. I want to start with some news that was released last week. The SEC put out the time slots for this upcoming 2025 season, and there's a couple of things that stood out for Auburn fans in particular that's got the family really excited. Some of these we already knew. This graphic I got off of Auburn Football social media, so full credit to them, by the way. I did not make this fantastic-looking graphic. Baylor at 7 p.m. Friday night on Fox. We already knew about that. I think the big takeaway there is that Auburn's going to be the biggest game on TV, probably going to be the biggest brand on TV that night. All eyes, that includes high school recruits, will be on Auburn, and Auburn's kind of lacking right now in high school recruiting. Big win versus Baylor. Get some momentum rolling. Then you got Ball State coming in to open up your home schedule. First home game of the year for Auburn. It will be a night game versus Ball State, 6:30 p.m. start. You got to think that'll be a good night on the Plains. Next weekend, South in your mouth, coming up from the 251, 11:45 kick there. Then Oklahoma is a flex, so that could go anywhere between 2 p.m. to 7 p.m. So it could be a night game. Could be in that afternoon slot. We'll kind of see how that goes. If Oklahoma starts off strong and Auburn's 3-0, that very well could be a night game. Jackson Arnold going back to his old team. That storyline will be beat to death for sure. And then the next week, Auburn traveling to A&M for what will be an afternoon game, 2:30, 3 o'clock, somewhere in that area. And then the big one, the one that's got the fan base fired up, baby. You see it right there on the bottom of your screen. That ain't no lie. Georgia at home, night. It just says night. It don't need to say nothing else. How beautiful is that? So let's just bug out a little bit. Let's just pump some sunshine here a little bit. But it might not even be sunshine pumping, as we'll get into later in the episode. This could be a very realistic possibility. Let's just say, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Let's say Auburn's 4-1. You drop either Oklahoma, Baylor, or Texas A&M there, right? How hype will that Georgia game be? How hype will that Georgia game be if Auburn is 4-1 with Georgia coming into town? Because I don't have Georgia's schedule right in front of me. I know they're playing a more difficult schedule this season than they have in years past. But I'm assuming that Georgia's not going to be too far off of a winning record themselves, right? They're going to have a good record. If Auburn's 4-1, if Auburn can get through those first 5 games, Baylor, Oklahoma, A&M, with just one loss, even if Auburn's 3-2, because if you're 3-2, you're kind of playing for your life in that Georgia game, right? Because 4-2 going into that second half of the schedule there, which you see on your screen, is a whole lot easier than the first half. 4-2 feels a lot different than 3-3. Only a 1-game difference, but it feels miles apart. So even if Auburn's 3-2, then it's more like desperation mode type thing, right? And we just haven't beat Georgia in forever. So either way, 4-1, 3-2, anything other than that, Auburn's going to be in some trouble, and the head coach will be reeling and all that kind of stuff. But under those two scenarios right there, which, I can't see Auburn being any worse than 3-2. Really hoping for the 4-1, obviously. 5-0 would be great. Some people listening going, why can't we be 5-0? We can be. And then the place is going to be up for grabs from opening kickoff. From the time the Eagle is let loose, Jordan-Hare is going to be a madhouse. Getting the Deep South's oldest rivalry, like breaking the chains, breaking free of that Vern Lundquist, Gary Danielson, and I love Vern, not so much love there for Gary. But breaking free of that 2:30 CBS time slot that kept these big Auburn games away from under the lights at Jordan-Hare for so long. CBS is always going to pick up Auburn versus Georgia because it's going to do ratings. It's two prominent SEC powerhouses. You know their fan bases are going to show up. And it is the Deep South's oldest rivalry. It's an intense rivalry. So everybody from across the country is tuning into that one. And lately, it hasn't been all that competitive. But historically, it's been one of the most competitive rivalries in college football. So with all the history behind it and just everything that goes into it, CBS was going to pick that up every time. They're probably not a game on their schedule, whatever weekend that Auburn and Georgia were playing, that's going to do better money-wise or better ratings-wise than that one. And CBS is going to feel real stupid if they didn't pick up Auburn, Georgia, and then a classic took place and they missed out on it. So they were always going to pick that up and put it in their 2:30 time slot, the same way they were always going to pick up the Iron Bowl and put it in the 2:30 time slot. Because what other game are they going to have that's going to be bigger than that one? They're the two of the biggest rivalries in college football. So Auburn has not had the ability to play Georgia at home at night in forever. Jordan-Hare Stadium will be up for grabs if Auburn does their part, comes into that game with a winning record. And obviously, the better the record that both teams have will only kind of add to the hype. I mean, you're looking at a potential college game day atmosphere if Auburn gets off to a 4-1 start and Georgia gets off to a hot start as well. And we know that it's been since 2017 since Auburn beat Georgia, and that's one of the only few victories in the last 20, 25 games. I mean, I'm not even going to do a deep dive into the numbers here today because, quite frankly, it'll break you guys' hearts, and y'all don't want to hear y'all don't want to hear that. There's no reason for us to go through it, but this is a Berlin Wall type moment. If we're just kind of projecting ahead, if Auburn is doing the things that they need to do on the field, if Auburn's 4-1 going into this game, you've had some commitments come through. The recruiting momentum is picked up. The visitors list for Georgia at night, with Auburn being potentially ranked coming into that matchup, a ranked Auburn versus ranked Georgia at night in Jordan-Hare Stadium, the visitors list that Hugh Freeze and his staff will put together would be through the freaking roof, man. It'd be on. We know how Hugh Freeze and his staff gets down when it comes to recruiting. So the atmosphere, like you thought, Texas A&M last year at night was lit. What is Georgia going to be? What is it going to be in that building? And then if Auburn can come through and get the win, it could really be a Berlin Wall type moment. It could be a monumental program-changing type win for Hugh Freeze. And I know that I'm kind of projecting ahead here, but I said there's going to be a little bit of sunshine pump on it. But the game hadn't happened yet. So we're guessing, what if Auburn wins? What is this going to look like if Auburn gets off to a hot start, Georgia gets off to a hot start, and you've got the Deep South's oldest rivalry taking place under the lights, man? Massive. It could be so big for Auburn University. Really, really fired up. Let's go ahead and get to the second half of this here. Missouri is a flex game, so afternoon tonight. We'll see how that goes. Arkansas will be an early game, so you're on the road at Fayetteville. I like on the road early, right? You're going to Arkansas, kick that thing off at 11 a.m. Hopefully Arkansas is reeling at that point. Maybe Sam Pittman's not even their coach anymore. It could be a completely dead atmosphere. You could go in there like you did last time and just blast them. But you owe Arkansas a little bit of revenge because they beat you by double digits in your building last year in the game that Auburn should have won. Kentucky at home is a flex, so afternoon could be night. I think that kind of depends on what Auburn's record is at that point, and what Kentucky's record is. So if both teams are decent, bowl-eligible type teams, you could easily see that be like an SEC Network 6:30 kickoff. We'll see how that goes. Vanderbilt in the afternoon, love that. You got to imagine that a lot of Auburn fans will make their trip up to Nashville as they always do. Get a nice little afternoon game there. And it'll be November 8th in Tennessee. Should be a beautiful fall afternoon, right? Nice 50 to 60 degree type weather. We should all be able to go up there and have a good time. And then Mercer being at 1 p.m. at home. It's Mercer. It's late in the season. It's the game right before the Iron Bowl. There's the ESPN Plus, SEC Network Plus. There will be the channels. But 1 o'clock start. Temperature should be good at that point, November 22nd. And then you got a flex game. Could be afternoon slot, could be night game for Alabama there as well. So potential to have Georgia and Alabama under the lights, man. Boy, that fires you up. You know, I'm 33 years old, guys. So I grew up in this generation where CBS always had the 2:30 time slot and they had their first pick. So like a lot of y'all that are watching the show, I haven't seen too many night Iron Bowls. I haven't seen too many night Auburn versus Georgia games. The last night Iron Bowl I can remember was 2014 in Bryant-Denny. So the Iron Bowl is usually fourth quarter. It's getting dark, you know, the sun's starting to go down and the lights come on in the fourth quarter. And that's its own cool thing. But man, to have Georgia and Alabama both kick off in prime time will be huge for Auburn, for the fans, for recruiting, just for everybody involved. So love this, man. I was so fired up when I saw this, and it's going to be a whole lot of fun. For sure got Georgia at night. I'm hoping we get Bama in there as well. Big opportunity for Auburn here to make some noise. Get out the gate early, man. Get out the gate hot early. Start fast. 4-1, 5-1, and then you can see the second half of this schedule. You can see a lot of these flexes open up, and Auburn could have opportunities to have a lot of night games in Jordan-Hare Stadium this year. And Auburn hasn't had that in years past. And quite frankly, when you've had 4 losing seasons in a row, when you haven't been competitive versus your biggest rivals, you don't necessarily deserve primetime games. So big opportunity right here for Auburn to make some noise on national television. Fires you up. All right, I wanted to get in here and get to the second segment of our show today. I was thinking, just what started me on this train of thought were, what are some of the more interesting teams in the SEC? I think Florida's very interesting. LSU, very interesting. Where is Brian Kelly at? South Carolina, are they going to take that next step under Shane Beamer with Lenore Sellers and all that coming back? But then I got to thinking about us. I got to thinking about my own team, Auburn. I was like, man, if I was an outsider, I would be looking at this team as one of the more interesting teams in the SEC. And why is that? Because I don't know what Auburn's going to do. High ceiling, I could easily see Auburn going 10-2. Low floor, I could see Auburn rattling off 4-8, 5-7. So I want to get in here and talk about what that looks like. What is it going to look like if Auburn reaches that high ceiling, that 10-2 level? What would it look like if Auburn hit that floor? What would the basement look like? What would have to go wrong for Auburn to get there? So let's get in there and discuss that. And I think that this whole discussion starts with one big question. It's the big question surrounding Auburn football this 2025 season. What are Jackson Arnold and Hugh Freeze going to do? And anybody that has watched this podcast knows that I understand the importance of the quarterback position, but I like to look at the line of scrimmage when I start off my opinion on a team and work my way out. This year, it's just, and I'm not, the quarterback position is very important. This year, though, it's so obvious what the big question is that sink or swim, we all kind of know. If we swim, if Auburn goes off and gets to 10-2, 9-3, it's because Jackson Arnold and Hugh Freeze mesh. If they fail, it's because they didn't. And that's what makes it so intriguing to me, is that Jackson Arnold is, we all know he's the 5-star talent, and everyone knows that Hugh Freeze has had great offensive years. Malik Willis, you can look back to his years at Ole Miss. The potential's there for both guys. No one would be surprised. People are actually kind of surprised at how bad Auburn's offense has been under Hugh Freeze the first 2 years at Auburn. That's really been the surprise. So no one would be shocked if Hugh Freeze got it corrected and got back to being what Hugh Freeze was statistically on offense before he arrived at Auburn. And would anybody be surprised if Jackson Arnold hit on all that potential? Because it's all there. That 5-star talent, it's all still there, but it didn't click at Oklahoma. And I'm not here today to rehash everything that happened at Oklahoma. Injuries, offensive coordinator, didn't have any receivers. I don't care. Ultimately, the end result was Jackson Arnold didn't work out at Oklahoma. Okay? Oklahoma came into Auburn's building and got a dub with Jackson Arnold on the bench. So Oklahoma beat Auburn last year and didn't even need Jackson Arnold, who is now Auburn's starting quarterback. We all have seen what Hugh Freeze has been the first 2 years at Auburn. The offense has been a mess. It's been dysfunctional. It's been disorganized. We've done member pods here, kind of breaking down why that's the case. But that hasn't been Hugh Freeze's legacy. That hasn't been Hugh Freeze prior to Auburn, or he wouldn't have got that job. So what happens if they hit? What does that look like? One, your offensive line is solidified. That means that Xavier Taplin, the transfer for Virginia Tech, was that guy. It means that whether it was Tutar Miller or Murphy, the transfer from USC, or Tyler Johnson, one of those guys got the other tackle position figured out. It means you have a healthy Connor Lew, and you have a lot of options there at guard. I'm really not worried about guard, but it just means that your offensive line fell in place. And I think it's going to be the best offensive line we've seen for Auburn in the last 5, 6, 7 years. It should be. On paper, it should be. But on paper doesn't win football games. Let's say the offensive line meshes and they're above average to good. And that's in all facets of the game. Running the football and pass pro. Because running the football last year was pretty solid. Pass pro left a lot to be desired. Let's say they mesh. Let's say it all works out. They're a good offensive line. Don't have to be great, but just good. What does that mean for the running backs? I don't think you see Damari Alston do what Jarquez Hunter did as far as role last year is in terms of carries. I think it's going to be more of a running back by committee. More so what you saw in Gus Malzahn's early tenures, or his early time at Auburn, where he had a power back in a Ben Tate and then a sweep guy in Ontario McCaleb. And then in 2010, Michael Dyer and Ontario McCaleb again. Trey Mason, right? And then Corey Grant was the speed sweep guy when Trey Mason was more of your downhill guy. I think you're going to see more of that with Damari Alston being your in-between the tackle guy and Jeremiah Cobb being your speed sweep and all that kind of stuff. But I don't want to see Cobb limited to that role. That's a discussion for another day. But I just think that's going to be kind of the setup, that 1-2 punch setup. And we'll see how, how the rest of the running back room falls out. You've got a transfer. You've got freshmen coming in. We'll see how all that goes. I think you're one and your two. Pretty safe bet to say it's going to be Damari and Jeremiah Cobb. So if the offensive line is productive, those guys should be able to do their job because they're talented. Leaves you with a wide receiver room, right? We don't have to say the obvious here. We know that this is the best wide receiver room, the most talented wide receiver room that Auburn maybe has ever had. But for sure, since Devin Aromashodu, Courtney Taylor, Ben Obamanu, Anthony Miggs, since those guys. There's no doubt it's the most talented wide receiver room since that group in the early 2000s. So for Auburn hits the ceiling, Jackson Arnold protects the football. Hugh Freeze sets Jackson Arnold up, puts him in good position. Hugh Freeze doesn't overthink it. When you're moving the football, when you're on the other side of the 50-yard line, you've picked up a couple first downs, don't ask your running back to throw a halfback pass. Don't bring a quarterback in on a speed sweep from the Wildcat and have him throw the ball. All this goofy stuff we've seen. You don't have to get too cute. If Auburn wants to reach their ceiling, particularly on offense, we'll get to defense here in a second. Protect the football. Don't get too cute. You have the weapons. That's the cool thing about it. Normally, with Auburn wide receivers, when we were looking at the offense and we were saying, what is the potential? What is the ceiling? The ceiling wasn't that high for the passing game because the pass catching, the talent for the wide receivers wasn't there. That's not the case. The ceiling's significantly higher for Auburn offense this season because of Eric Singleton, an NFL talent, Cam Coleman, an NFL talent, Perry Thompson, an NFL talent, Malcolm Simmons, NFL talent, We'll see what Horatio Fields. We'll see if Sam Turner can continue that momentum that he had from camp. But we're excited about a lot of guys in that room. And they all kind of do different things. You got a couple guys that do the same thing, good for depth, but you've got guys that can all do some different stuff. You can do a lot of things with Eric Singleton. Cam Coleman's not a one-trick pony. You can move these guys around. You can go to 10, 11. There's a lot of things you can do personnel-wise. And there's a lot of guys that are going to have to catch the football. There's only one football. If Jackson Arnold is protecting the football and he's the guy, he's going to have to feed a lot of mouths. He's got a lot of guys to keep happy. When's the last time we said that about Auburn? So if we're looking at what the ceiling is, if Auburn hits the ceiling, it starts with protecting the football, hitting the wide open guy, not getting too cute, establishing the run game, and using your playmakers. On defense, what is the ceiling for Auburn on defense? To me, there's not a whole lot that has to change. Because when I look at Missouri last year, if you had a competent offense, you win the game last year. If you have a competent offense, you win the Cal game last year. If you have a competent offense, you win the Vanderbilt game last year. If you have a competent offense, you win the Arkansas game last year. So I'm not looking at I'm not going to spend a lot of time on defense because they got to get better on third down, getting off the field on third and long in particular. And they got to get better at creating a little bit of turnover. I want to see some more turnovers, create some more havoc. Very good, sound, structured defense, but sometimes, man, you just got to pick the ball off and take it 30 yards down the field and set your offense up first and goal inside the 20. And there wasn't enough of that from the Auburn defense last year. For the Auburn defense to hit the ceiling, guys like Keldrick Faulk got to stay healthy. I'm a little concerned about depth on the defensive side of the ball. The top layer of the defense is stout. When we talk about ceiling for like the secondary, just play. Like, just be y'all. You know what I'm saying? Like, stay healthy because Kane Lee's a dog, because Jalen Crawford is a dog, because Caleb Harris is a dog. I believe that Sylvester Smith's going to be that guy. I could go down the list of guys in that defensive backfield of Anquan Fagans, Eric Winters, two freshmen that are going to have a big impact. So the floor for those guys was like elevated, right? Like, I don't see a world where Auburn's defense. Now injuries always play a part. So if there's injuries that come into play and depth kind of becomes an issue for Auburn, like if Keldrick Faulk gets hurt and, some of those guys you're kind of depending on to, K'Ron Crawford, some of those guys you're depending on to be the premium pass rushers. If those guys go down, I don't like the depth in certain positions. I kind of like the depth in secondary. I'm not a big fan of the depth up front and in the middle at linebacker. You got young guys in the linebacker room. I'm still very high on DJ Barber. He didn't play a lot last year. I like Robert Woodyard there as a role player. I love Elijah Melendez. I think he's going to be a significant contributor. DeMarcus Riddick. We got guys there, but there's still some question marks as far as unproven depth. So really just injuries would be what would derail the Auburn defense. But other than that, there's not a whole lot for them to improve on outside of third down defense. That's really about getting to the pass rusher about the pass rush, getting to the quarterback. And then creating the turnovers, from the secondary or whoever, like sack fumbles from the D-line, whoever. So there's just some little things right there for the defense. But when we're talking ceiling and floor with the defense, you have a high ceiling, top 10. Like if everything hits on defense, you'll have a top 10 defense. You will. If Auburn hits on defense, if it hits its max potential, it'll be a top 5 to top 10 defense. Floor. Some things go wrong, it's still a top 30. Like I just don't see the defense falling down a whole lot. Like the floor is elevated so high for those guys, in my opinion. I'm just expecting this to be a really solid Auburn defense no matter what. The floor for the offense is really what could derail the season. So when we look at how does it get to maybe a 5-7 or a 6-6? If Auburn hits the floor, it's because of that big question we alluded to a minute ago. And you get the opposite answer. What if, okay, we've done a lot of positive projecting, a lot of positive, what if everything goes right in this episode? The floor is Jackson Arnold's not good. that he got benched at Oklahoma because he's not good. And I'm not saying that's the case. We're playing ceiling and floor here, right? What if he's not good? What if, yes, Oklahoma had problems last year, but Arnold's still not the guy? And what you saw from him getting benched and not reaching his and not being that 5-star recruit that everyone thought he was, what if that's who he is? Because plenty of 5-star quarterbacks have missed. What if he's not that guy? What if Hugh Freeze is no longer the coach that he was previously? What if his RPO system has kind of been figured out? What if the stats that guys like Brooke Austin were throwing out last year about how more years than not, Hugh Freeze's offense is high up there, like leads the country or is close to leading the country a lot of times in turnovers? What if the incompetence for the 3 to 4 hours on game day every Saturday, what if Hugh Freeze continues that? They're taking the timeouts with 2 seconds before a 2-minute warning, and then in the post game saying, "I forgot." What if it's the third down when you're running the ball down Oklahoma's throat and you decide to throw the ball and it leads to a turnover? All those things that we've seen from Hugh Freeze, like I alluded to, the trick plays at the worst times. What if those things continue? What if what we saw from Hugh Freeze and Peyton Thorne continues? Because Hugh Freeze has missed on his one transfer quarterback so far at Auburn. I would argue he missed twice because you didn't have a good season with Peyton Thorne the first time. You doubled down. You blamed Philip Montgomery, and you said, "I'm going to get it fixed this time with Derek Nix," and you didn't get it fixed. I think it was better, like overall, if you zoom out, but the results were the same. You actually won less game. You won one less game than you did the previous year. So the results ultimately, like the stats looked better. You still got the same result. And when you had to get clutch quarterback play, you didn't get it. What if that's just Hugh Freeze is now? And this happens. You know, there's the whole crowd out there that says Auburn never should have fired Gus Malzahn. And then they use the fact that Auburn hasn't had a winning season since that happened as their validation. My pushback to that crowd is, where the hell is Gus Malzahn? He flamed out at UCF. It was obvious his offense has been figured out. He couldn't even get it to work there, playing less competition. And now he's an OC at a program that just won 2 games last year. He's hanging on to his coaching career for dear life. It's not like Gus left Auburn and kept killing it, and Auburn's looking at him like, "Oh my God, look what we let go." That's not what happened. Gus doesn't have a pivot. Gus got figured out, and he doesn't have a pivot. What if that's Hugh Freeze? What if there's no pivot? What if there's no innovation? What if he's cooked? It's a possibility. We're going to find out this year one way or the other. So when we talk about Auburn and the floor to me is pretty simple. You have a head coach that's coming into the season on the hot seat because he's been garbage his first 2 years at his current school. You have a starting quarterback coming in who was named starting quarterback really early in the process, who lost his job and didn't fulfill his potential at his last stop. So you got 2 guys that there's a lot of question marks about currently that the season's riding on. So I could easily see this going off the rails. I'm not predicting it, but what I'm telling you is, and the point of this episode is I wouldn't be shocked if Auburn went 9-3 and 10-2, and I wouldn't be shocked if Auburn went 4-8 or 5-7. I think it's going to fall somewhere in the middle. I'm probably going to predict 7-5, 8-4 once we get into fall camp. I'm not going to go one way or the other as far as on the extremes, but I could see, man. I've seen Hugh Freeze put it together before. Malik Willis hasn't done anything in the NFL, but boy, Hugh Freeze made him a first-round pick. If I get that Hugh Freeze with all of the talent that Jackson Arnold has, with Auburn's defense and all the playmakers, you got McPherson coming back to fix the field goal problem. You shouldn't be losing game because of missed field goals anymore. Points left on the field. Man, it's easy to see Auburn going 9-3, 10-2. All the talent's there, and the back half of that schedule, if you get through the first 6, 4-2, you should easily finish it. If Auburn's 4-2 in the first 6, they should easily finish the season. The next 6, 5-1, right? So, wouldn't be shocked if that happened. I also wouldn't be shocked because like I just said, they're both a big question mark. Jackson Arnold hasn't proven anything, and Hugh Freeze hasn't proven anything at Auburn. And all of a sudden, these guys are just going to link up together, and they're going to get it figured out? Maybe. One, because they're both talented guys in their positions. Hugh Freeze doesn't suck as a head coach, and Jackson Arnold's got all the talent as a quarterback. And Auburn's just goofy enough. Auburn football is just goofy enough to where maybe that's the one that works. The two big question marks where you're like, these guys both kind of need each other here. Maybe that's the one that comes together for Auburn and works out. Auburn could hit the floor, though, if it doesn't, because you've seen it in years past. Regardless of how good a defense is, Auburn's defense was really solid last year. Kept Auburn in a lot of games. The defense wears down. A good defense will still wear down over a 12-game SEC season when they're continuously asked to come out on the field and get stops, and the offense is not helping them at all. They will wear down. We've seen it time and time again over this last decade, really. So, if Auburn doesn't reach a bowl game, if it all falls apart, and this is Hugh Freeze's last season on the Plains, it's because he missed on Jackson Arnold, and/or he no longer has the ability to put quarterbacks in the best position possible. It won't be because lack of weapons. It won't be because of the defensive side of the ball. It shouldn't be because of special teams this year. I know special teams are more than just field goal kicking, but field goal kicking specifically, and Oscar Chapman kind of lost it late in the season last year, and that affected field position and all that. There's a lot of things on this football team that have elevated what Auburn's floor should be. But ultimately, if Jackson Arnold comes out there and continues to fumble the football, continues to turn the ball over the way he did versus Oklahoma, if Hugh Freeze continues to have goofy play calling and bad in-game decision-making, then, boy, I'm sorry. It is storming here in Pensacola. I got to get this episode wrapped up before I lose my power. But that, to me, that's kind of where Auburn sits as one of the more intriguing teams in the entire country, because I'm not sure. Again, I think it's going to fall somewhere in the middle, but there are so many scenarios that could play out for Auburn next year that ultimately wouldn't surprise me. But it's going to come down more so than a lot of other years. And I know people can say this every single year, but man, I check so many boxes where I'm like, this room should be okay for Auburn. This room should be okay for Auburn. This room should be okay for Auburn. I could go down the list of positions. That quarterback and that head coach relationship. Can it work? Can it work? That's going to be the big question. That's going to be the big question, that whether Auburn is in the playoff hunt or Auburn is struggling to make a bowl. We'll see how it goes. Thank you all for watching, man. Please smash that thumbs up button. Sub to the channel if you have not done it yet. If you're listening on audio, please leave a 5-star review. Go ahead and sub there as well. Follow us on Apple, Spotify, all those kind of things. I love all you guys and appreciate you, everyone that's listening on those platforms. And if you are interested in signing up for the memberships, now is the time to do it. $3.99 a month for the JV squad, $5.99 for the varsity squad. JV squad gets members only live chat, member shout outs, priority reply to comments. You get early access to videos just like this one. The members will see this one first. Exclusive gifts as well. Varsity squad, you get everything JV squad gets. You get exclusive recruiting update videos, game day group chat, gameplay with you, and discounted merchandise. I think we got some of that coming up for you guys before the season, some new merch and all that kind of stuff. So again, I want to say thank you to everybody for watching this episode, and I will see y'all on the next one. I'm out. Boy, damn Eagle, baby.